snow was knee-deep in bitter cold. Elara Ashford stood in it, her worn leather boots already soaked through her breath, forming desperate clouds in the freezing air. Behind her, pressed against her threadbare wool skirt, a 5-year-old boy named Corbin trembled. His small fingers clutched the fabric like it was the only solid thing left in the world. 20 feet away, emerging from the absolute darkness of the Blackwood forest, a nightmare took form. The rogue wolf was massive, easily twice the size of any normal shifted wolf. Its fur hung in matted, blood-crusted clumps. Patches of gray, diseased skin showed through where the hair had rotted away entirely. One eye was a milky, sightless white. The other burned yellow with a crazed, ravenous light that promised only violence and death. It stalked forward. Not the graceful prowl of a predator, the lurching, uneven gait of something that had lost its mind long ago and now existed only to kill. Elara's hands were empty. No weapon, no claws to extend, no fangs to bear. She was entirely painfully human. Above them on the high stone balcony overlooking the castle's outer bailey, torches flared to life. The heavy oak doors banged open. A dozen royal guards rushed to the railing, their polished armor catching the firelight. Crossbows rose. Bolts were knocked. Fingers found triggers. At the center of the formation stood King Theron Blackstone. His black wolf fur cloak whipped in the violent wind. The heavy silver chains clasping it across his broad shoulders gleamed like ice. His face was all harsh angles and brutal scars. A jagged line ran from his left temple down to his jaw, a souvenir from the northern rebellions that had nearly torn the realm apart. His eyes were glacial blue, cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who had slaughtered his way to absolute power and never once looked back. Elara stared up at him. Relief flooded her chest. They had seen the rogue. They would kill it. The king's elite guard never missed. Corbin would be safe. The captain of the guard raised his hand. His voice cut through the howling wind. Fire! The word hung in the air for half a heartbeat. Then King Theron Blackstone spoke. Hold. The single word carried a weight that crushed the air itself. The archers froze. Crossbows dipped slightly, fingers easing off triggers. Confusion rippled through the line of soldiers. My king, the captain protested, his voice cracking with disbelief. The cub. I said, hold your fire, commander. Theron's voice dropped lower, quieter, more dangerous. Let us see what the Ashford runt is truly made of. The world tilted. Elara felt the ground shift beneath her feet, not physically, something deeper. The fragile hope that someone, anyone would help her, shattered like glass under a hammer. He was not going to save her. The Alpha King of all wolves, the supposed protector of the realm, stood on his balcony and watched. She was entirely on her own, 24 hours earlier. The Ashford pack had arrived at Winterguard Castle at midday, their banners snapping in the mountain wind. 3 wagons laden with trunks and supplies. 15 wolves on horseback, their heads held high, their postures radiating the arrogance that came with being one of the oldest bloodlines in the realm. Elara walked behind the last wagon. Not rode, walked. Her arms ached from carrying the heavy leather bags. Her boots were caked in mud from the long road through the mountain passes. The coarse wool dress she wore was 2 sizes too large, handed down from a kitchen servant who had died 3 winters ago. It hung on her small frame like a sack. No one offered her a horse. No one offered to carry her bags. She was the runt, the defective one, the Ashford wolf who had never shifted. At 22 years old, her wolf remained utterly, devastatingly silent. No heightened senses, no supernatural strength, no transformation under the full moon. Just a fragile human body in a world built for predators. The other pack members rode past her without a glance. Seraphina Vale tossed her golden hair over one shoulder and laughed at something Cale Thornridge said. Neither looked back. Elara kept her head down and followed. Winterguard loomed ahead. A massive fortress of gray stone perched on the side of a mountain, its towers clawing at the sky. Banners from 100 different packs hung from the battlements. The Blood Moon Summit brought them all here. Alphas and their entourages gathering to negotiate alliances, broker marriages, settle territorial disputes. It was the most important political event in the realm, a tradition that stretched back centuries. For Elara, it was just another stage for her daily torment. She dragged the bags through the massive iron gates. The courtyard was chaos, servants rushing everywhere, horses stamping and snorting. Alphas shouting orders. The air smelled of leather and sweat and the faint, ever-present musk of wolves. "Move it, runt!" Kale's boot caught her ankle as he dismounted. Not hard enough to trip her, just enough to make her stumble. The heavy bag slipped from her shoulder and hit the cobblestones with a dull thud. Laughter rippled through the nearby Ashford wolves. Elara said nothing. She knelt, gathered the bag, kept her eyes down. Fighting back only made it worse. She had learned that lesson at 12 years old. The memory surfaced unbidden. A circular stone chamber deep beneath the Ashford estate, torches casting flickering shadows on the walls. 50 wolves gathered in a ring, their eyes reflecting the firelight like stars. Elara stood in the center, 12 years old, small for her age, hopeful in a way that made her chest ache even now. The shift ceremony was supposed to be the most important night of a wolf's life, the moment when the human and the beast became one, when the bloodline awakened. Lord Halvard Ashford stood at the edge of the circle, her pack's alpha, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, with a voice that could command a battlefield. His eyes were hard, expectant. The elder began the ritual chant, ancient words in a language older than the realm itself. The other young wolves around the circle began to shift. Bones cracked, fur sprouted, yelps of pain mixed with howls of triumph. Elara closed her eyes, reached inside herself for the spark, the connection, the wolf that was supposed to be waiting. Nothing. Silence. An emptiness so profound it felt like drowning. She opened her eyes. The other young wolves had completed their shifts. Beautiful, strong creatures. Their parents beamed with pride. Halvard stared at her. Disgust twisted his features. "Useless," he said. The word echoed off the stone walls. A runt. An embarrassment to the Ashford name. That night she stopped sleeping in the family wing. They moved her to the servants' quarters, gave her a straw mattress and a bucket for washing. She had been there ever since. The Great Hall of Winterguard was a cathedral of rough-hewn stone and ancient timber. Massive wooden beams crisscrossed overhead, supporting a ceiling lost in shadow. Tapestries depicting wolf deities and legendary battles hung from iron hooks. The floor was polished stone, worn smooth by centuries of boots and claws. Tonight it was packed. 100 wolves from a dozen different packs filled the space. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted boar venison and whole pheasants still steaming. Casks of dark ale and honey mead lined the walls. The air was thick with heat and noise and the overwhelming scent of too many predators in one place. Elara moved through the chaos like a ghost. She carried a massive wooden tray loaded with pewter tankards. The ale sloshed dangerously close to the rim with each step. Her shoulders screamed. Her hands were blistered from a week of forced labor preparing for the summit. She had learned to be invisible, to move through crowds without drawing attention, to serve and disappear before anyone noticed her. Tonight, invisibility failed her. Her boot caught on an uneven stone. Not her fault. The floor was ancient and treacherous in places, but fault did not matter. The tray tipped. Ale splashed across the hem of her dress and onto the boots of a wolf standing nearby. Seraphina Vale turned, slowly. Her golden hair caught the firelight, making her look like something out of a legend. Beautiful. Cruel. Her lips curved into a smile that promised pain. "Watch your step, little human." The hall did not go silent, but a pocket of quiet spread around them. Wolves turned to watch. Some grinned. Others looked away, unwilling to be associated with what was about to happen. Elara opened her mouth to apologize. Seraphina's boot hooked her ankle. This time the trip was not subtle. Elara pitched forward. The tray flew from her hands. 20 tankards of ale crashed to the stone floor in an explosion of sound. The thick, dark liquid spread in a pool around her knees. Laughter erupted. Still playing the servant Elara, Seraphina's voice carried over the noise. Sweet. Mocking, designed to humiliate. "I suppose it is the only way you can make yourself useful. Since you cannot hunt, you might as well clean up after those who do." Cale Thornridge appeared beside her. He nudged one of the fallen tankards with the toe of his boot, sending it spinning across the wet stone. "How does it feel, runt, knowing you will never be anything more than this?" Elara kept her head bowed. Her damp hair fell forward, hiding the hot tears that pricked at her eyes. She scrambled to gather the tankards. Her hands were shaking, rough and blistered and utterly human. She did not respond. Words were weapons she could not afford to use. The laughter continued. Wolves she did not know joined in sensing easy prey. Then the laughter stopped. It did not fade. It cut off, as if someone had severed the sound itself. The temperature in the great hall dropped. Not physically, something deeper. A pressure descended on the room, crushing and absolute. The kind of dominance that made even the strongest alphas lower their gazes and bare their throats without thinking. King Theron Blackstone had entered. Elara did not look up. She could not. The weight of his presence was too much. It pressed down on her shoulders, making it hard to breathe. But she felt him. Every wolf in the hall felt him. He moved through the silence like a blade through water. His footsteps were measured, unhurried. The black wolf fur cloak dragged across the stone behind him, the heavy silver chains clinking softly with each step. His royal guard followed. 10 warriors in polished chainmail in dark leather, their hands resting on the hilts of swords that had tasted blood in 100 battles. Elara's fingers closed around a dented tankard. She was still kneeling in the pool of ale, still gathering the mess, still invisible. Or so she thought. The footsteps stopped. She felt his gaze on her like a physical touch. Heavy, searching. It crawled across her skin, raising goosebumps. Against every instinct, screaming at her to stay down, to remain unseen. Elara looked up. King Theron Blackstone stood 10 feet away. He was a vision of medieval brutality. Taller than any man she had ever seen, his shoulders broad enough to block out the firelight behind him. The scar that ran from temple to jaw was pale against his tanned skin, a jagged reminder of violence survived. His hair was dark, almost black, cut short in a military style. But it was his eyes that stole her breath. Cold as a winter sky, utterly, devastatingly unreadable. Their gazes locked. For a fraction of a second, something passed between them. A jolt. A tightening in her chest that felt like recognition, though she had never seen him before in her life. Her wolf should have stirred, should have recognized something. But her wolf was silent, as always. Elara expected pity, or perhaps disgust. She had seen both often enough in the eyes of powerful wolves. She got neither. Theron's expression remained a mask of cold stone. No emotion, no acknowledgement. He looked at her the way one might look at a piece of furniture. Present but irrelevant. Then he turned his head, broke the connection, walked past her without a word. The pressure lifted as he took his seat at the high table. Conversation resumed, quieter now, more cautious. Wolves returned to their meals, though their eyes kept flicking to the king. Elara remained on her knees, alone. The message was brutally clear. In Winterguard, the weak were left to fend for themselves. She swallowed the bitter lump in her throat, finished gathering the tankards, carried the tray of ruined ale toward the servants' entrance, her dress soaked and heavy, her face burning with shame. Behind her, Seraphina's laughter rang out again, quieter this time, more private, shared with Kael like a secret. Elara pushed through the heavy oak door and stumbled into the corridor beyond. The oppressive heat of the great hall gave way immediately to the brutal biting cold of the mountain night. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees. Her breath misted in front of her face. She leaned against the stone wall and closed her eyes. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remember how to breathe without the weight of 100 stairs pressing down on her. The corridor was empty. Torches mounted in iron brackets provided weak flickering light. Somewhere deeper in the castle, she could hear the muffled sounds of the feast continuing. Laughter, music, the clatter of plates. She was not part of that world. She had never been part of that world. A door at the far end of the corridor opened. A servant emerged, an older woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. She saw Elara and paused. "You need firewood," the woman said. Not a question, a statement. Lord Halvard sent word. The Ashford guest quarters need restocking before the night gets colder. Elara nodded. Of course. Punishment dressed up as duty. Halvard's favorite trick. The timber stacks are near the outer wall, the woman continued. By the forest edge. Be quick. The wind is picking up. Elara pushed off the wall, wrapped her thin, frayed shawl tighter around her shoulders. It did almost nothing against the cold, but it was all she had. The walk through the castle took 10 minutes. Down 3 flights of stone stairs. Through a series of corridors that grew progressively colder and darker. Past the armory where weapons gleamed on racks. Past the barracks where off-duty guards played dice and drank. No one stopped her. No one even looked at her. She emerged into the outer bailey through a small side door. The cold hit like a fist. The courtyard was blanketed in fresh snow at least 8 inches deep and still falling. The wind howled through the battlements, carrying the scent of pine and impending blizzard. Iron braziers mounted on the walls provided islands of orange light, but between them the darkness was absolute. Elara trudged forward. Each step sank into the snow up to her knees. Her boots, already soaked from earlier, offered no protection. Within minutes, her feet were numb. The timber stacks were exactly where the servant had said. Massive piles of split logs covered with oiled canvas to keep them dry. They sat near the outer perimeter of the castle grounds, where the manicured bailey gave way to the wild. Beyond the stacks, perhaps 50 yards away, the blackwood forest loomed. Ancient pines stretched toward the sky, their branches heavy with snow. The spaces between the trees were pools of absolute darkness. The forest had a reputation. Outlaws hid there. Exiles made camps in its depths. And worse things. Rogues, wolves who had lost their humanity, driven mad by isolation, violence, or some internal breaking. They became monsters, feral, mindless, killers, but the perimeter was warded, heavily guarded by Theron's elite soldiers, or so everyone said. Elara approached the timber stack and began loading her arms with logs. The wood was frozen solid, biting her already blistered hands. She gritted her teeth and kept working. 3 logs, 4, 5. A sound stopped her, faint, muffled by the wind and snow, a whimper. Elara froze. Every instinct told her to ignore it, to finish loading the firewood and get back inside where it was warm and safe. But the sound came again. A child. She dropped the logs, squinted into the gloom near the edge of the tree line. There, a small figure wrapped in a rich velvet cloak far too large for their body, wandering dangerously close to the forest. Stumbling through the snow, it was a boy, maybe 5 years old. His face was red from cold and tears. He was chasing something. A small carved wooden horse that had tumbled down the snowy embankment toward the dark trees. "Corbin!" Elara called out, keeping her voice low so as not to startle him. She had seen him earlier clinging to his father's hand, Lord Alaric Grayson, one of the southern alphas, visiting for the summit. The boy turned, his bottom lip trembled. "My horsey," he sniffled, pointing into the dense thicket. "I dropped it." "I will get it," Elara said, her heart pounding. She hurried through the knee-deep snow, reaching him in seconds. "But we need to go back inside. Right now, it is too cold out here." She pulled him behind her skirt instinctively, putting herself between the child and the forest. Before she could take another step, the wind shifted. The smell hit her like a physical blow. Rotting meat, wet copper, feral sickness. The stench of something that had been dead inside for a very long time. From the absolute darkness between the trees, a nightmare emerged. It did not walk like a wolf. It stalked like a broken thing. Limbs moving at wrong angles, head lowered, drool freezing as it dripped from yellowed fangs. The rogue was massive, far larger than any normal shifted wolf. Its fur was matted with dried blood and filth, missing in huge patches to reveal gray-scarred skin beneath. One eye was a milky blind white, the other burned with a crazed yellow light. It saw them, its lips peeled back. The growl that rumbled from its chest was a sound that did not belong in the natural world. Corbin let out a piercing, terrified shriek. "Guards!" Elara screamed. Her voice tore through the freezing night, raw and desperate. "Rogue guards, help!" She shoved Corbin hard behind a nearby stone pillar. The boy stumbled but caught himself, pressing his back against the cold stone. Elara had no weapons, no claws, no fangs. She stood between the monster and the child in a woolen dress and leather boots. Above them, on the high balcony overlooking the bailey, the heavy oak doors banged open. Porches flared. Armored guards rushed to the railing, their boots pounding on stone. Crossbows were raised, bolts knocked. At the center stood King Theron Blackstone, his black cloak whipping in the violent wind. Relief flooded Elara's chest. A sob caught in her throat. They saw them. They would kill it. The king's guard never missed. "Fire!" Commander Draven shouted, raising his hand. "Hold!" The word cut through the wind like a steel blade. Every head turned toward Theron. The archers lowered their weapons slightly, confusion rippling through their ranks. "My king," Draven protested, his voice cracking. "The cub." "I said, hold your fire, Commander." Theron's voice was dangerously quiet, utterly calm. Let us see what the Ashford runt is truly made of. Elara stared up at the balcony. Disbelief crashed over her in a wave so powerful it stole her breath. He was not going to help. The Alpha King stood at the edge of the parapet, his hands resting casually on the stone. That ice-cold stare locked directly on her. He was watching, studying, testing. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over Elara. It was instantly replaced by a searing, explosive rage. He was using a child's life to test her. He was leaving her to die. The rogue did not care about the politics on the balcony. It let out a guttural, bone-rattling roar and charged. Its massive paws tore up chunks of frozen earth and snow. The sound of its approach was thunder. Elara had no time to panic. Survival instinct, raw and purely human, kicked in. She lunged to the side, grabbing the heavy iron-headed wood-cutting axe that had been left near the timber stack. The handle was freezing roughwood, but she gripped it with both hands. The rogue leaped. The beast collided with her mid-swing. The sheer force of the impact threw her backward into the snow. The axe flew from her hands, spinning end over end, before disappearing into a snowdrift. The rogue was on top of her in an instant. Its jaws snapped inches from her face. The putrid breath choked her. Strings of drool splashed across her cheek, freezing almost instantly. Elara screamed. She brought her forearms up, shoving them against the monster's throat to keep its fangs from tearing out her jugular. Its claws raked down her shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm. White-hot and overwhelming. The thick wool of her dress tore like paper. The claws sank deep into her flesh, carving furrows that immediately welled with blood. The crimson soaked her sleeves, steaming in the freezing air. "Elara!" Corbin cried out from behind the pillar. "Stay back!" she shrieked at the boy. The rogue's jaws snapped closer. Its drool splashed onto her face. She was losing leverage. Her human strength was nothing compared to the monstrous weight crushing her ribs. Her hands scrabbled desperately in the snow. Touched something solid. One of the thick, jagged logs she had dropped earlier. With a desperate cry, she grabbed it and swung blindly. The log connected with the side of the rogue's head with a sickening crack. The beast yelped. A flash of shock broke through the crazed yellow eye. It rolled to the side, shaking its massive head. Elara did not hesitate. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the agonizing bleeding gashes on her shoulder. Her vision swam. She tasted copper. She dove for the nearest iron brazier torch mounted on the wall. The metal pole was heavy, nearly as tall as she was, but she hoisted it up. The fire roaring at the end cast wild dancing shadows across the snow. The rogue recovered, its yellow eye narrowed. Intelligence flickered there. Hateful, calculating. It realized its prey was not going to submit. Up on the balcony, the silence was deafening. The guards stood frozen, watching the brutal dance below. Serafina and Kale had come out to watch, expecting to see the pathetic Elara torn to ribbons. Yet Theron remained motionless. His winter blue eyes narrowed, missing absolutely nothing. Elara stood between the rogue and the weeping child, gripping the burning iron torch like a spear. Her blood dripped steadily onto the white snow, staining it a brilliant, terrifying crimson. Her breath came in ragged, painful gasps. "Come on, you ugly bastard," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but beneath the fear something else emerged, something venomous and feral that she did not know she possessed. The rogue lunged again, not aiming for a bite this time. A sweeping claw strike meant to disembowel. Elara dropped to her knees, slid beneath the arc of its massive arm. As the beast passed over her, she thrust the burning brazier upward with every ounce of strength she had left. The red-hot iron and flaming coals drove directly into the rogue's soft underbelly. The stench of searing flesh and burning hair instantly filled the courtyard. The monster let out a deafening, agonizing shriek. It thrashed wildly, trying to escape the fire. A stray claw caught Elara across the ribs. The impact threw her violently against the stone wall of the keep. Her vision swam. White spots danced across her sight. Pain radiated from her side in waves. The taste of copper flooded her mouth. The torch had rolled away sizzling as it died in the snow. Through her blurring vision, she saw the rogue recovering. The burn on its stomach had only enraged it further. It was no longer looking for a meal. It wanted revenge. It slowly stalked toward her, fangs bared, preparing for the final lethal strike. Elara slumped against the icy stone. She had nothing left. No weapons, no strength. Her shoulder was a mess of torn flesh. Her ribs screamed with every breath. She looked up at the balcony one last time. Theron was still there, a dark, imposing statue against the night sky. His expression had not changed. A strange, profound calm suddenly washed over Elara. I will not die a coward, she thought. I will not give him the satisfaction. The monstrous rogue leaped into the air, jaws wide to tear her apart. Elara closed her eyes, braced for death. But deep within her chest, in the darkest, most forgotten corner of her soul, something ancient and terrible finally snapped awake. The rogue was suspended in the air, a mass of rotting muscle and lethal fangs descending toward Alara's throat. Time fractured, slowed to an excruciating crawl. The agonizing pain in her ribs, the searing tear in her shoulder, the biting cold of the snow, all of it faded into white noise. In that infinite, decimally small pocket of time, between life and certain death, the dormant spark within Elara ignited into a raging inferno. It did not feel like the graceful, natural shifting process the other wolves described. It felt like a tectonic rupture. A sound like shattering glass echoed inside her skull, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated power that tasted like lightning in ancient copper. It was not just a wolf waking up. It was a primordial entity breaking out of a 22-year prison. A shockwave of sheer force blasted outward from Alara's fragile human body. The rogue mid-pounce hit the invisible wall of energy and was hurled backward. It crashed into the frozen timber stack with a sickening crunch of wood and bone. Up on the balcony, the mocking sneers of Seraphina and Cahill vanished. King Theron Blackstone finally moved. He gripped the stone parapet, leaned forward. Those piercing blue eyes widened as the impossible unfolded in the courtyard below. A blinding, ethereal silver light engulfed Elara. Her human screams twisted, dropped an octave, morphed into a terrifying, guttural roar that shook the very foundations of Winterguard Castle. Her bones snapped and elongated with sickening cracks that echoed through the bailey. But there was no pain, only an overwhelming, intoxicating rush of dominance. When the light snapped out of existence, Elara was gone. Standing between the weeping Corbin and the recovering rogue was a monster of a completely different breed. She was not a standard pack wolf. She was massive, easily standing a foot taller at the shoulder than Theron's largest elite guards. Her fur was a dazzling, unnatural shade of pure, iridescent silver. It seemed to catch and magnify the moonlight, making her glow like a creature out of legend. But it was her eyes that paralyzed the onlookers. Pools of liquid glowing amethyst, burning with an ancient royal fury. "Goddess above," whispered Lord Halvard Ashford. He had stepped out onto the balcony, his face drained of all color. His hands gripped the railing so hard his knuckles went white. "A sterling," he breathed. "It is impossible." The bloodline was eradicated. Down in the snow, the sterling lichen did not care about pack politics or ancient law. Her violet gaze locked onto the rogue. The beast was pulling itself from the splintered logs, shaking its deformed head. It looked at the colossal silver wolf, and for the first time hesitated. Its crazed yellow eye flashed with a flicker of pure, animalistic dread. Elara did not wait. The ground shuddered as she launched herself forward. The speed of her wolf form was blinding. It defied her sheer size. The rogue tried to swipe at her with its mangled claws. Elara ducked under the blow with supernatural agility. She slammed her massive shoulder into the beast's chest. The impact sounded like a battering ram hitting castle gates. The rogue's ribs shattered instantly. As it tumbled backward into the snow, Elara was upon it. There was no honor in this fight. This was an execution, her jaws lined with teeth that looked more like polished sabers than wolf fangs clamped down on the rogue's thick matted neck. The beast thrashed, desperately clawed at her silver flanks. But her hide was impenetrable, woven with the ancient magic of a forgotten lineage. With one vicious, brutal snap of her head, the sound of breaking vertebrae cracked through the silent night. The rogue went entirely limp. Its dark blood seeped into the pristine white snow. The sterling wolf released the carcass, stepped over it. She turned her massive silver head back toward the stone pillar where little Corbin was hiding. The boy was staring at her, wide-eyed, trembling. Elara let out a low rumbling huff that sounded almost like a purr. She lowered her massive head to the snow, nudged the small, carved wooden horse toward the boy with her nose. Corbin slowly reached out. His tiny hand brushed her silver muzzle before he grabbed his toy. "Thank you," he whispered. Satisfied the cub was safe, Elara turned her gaze upward. her amethyst eyes locked onto the balcony, piercing straight through the darkness to meet King Theron Blackstone's frost-blue stare. The silence between them stretched, thick with tension and unspoken truce. Then the adrenaline vanished, the sheer overwhelming toll of the transformation and the blood loss from her human wounds caught up with her. Her wolf form swayed, let out a soft, pained whimper, and collapsed into the snow. The silver light flared once more. She shifted back into her human form, naked, bruised, bleeding on the frozen earth, human again, unconscious. The runt of Ashford had become something the realm had not seen in a generation, and the Alpha King had been watching the entire time. Chaos erupted on the balcony. "Get the healers!" Lord Alaric Grayson roared, already sprinting toward the stairs to reach his son. His boots thundered on stone. Behind him, nobles from a dozen different packs surged forward, pressing against the railing to see the impossible creature lying in the snow below. But King Theron Blackstone was already moving. He did not take the stairs. In one fluid motion, he vaulted over the stone parapet, dropped 20 feet into the courtyard below, landed heavily but gracefully in the snow, his thick black fur cloak billowing around him like wings. He did not spare a single glance for the dead rogue, did not acknowledge the royal guards now pouring out of the keep, their weapons drawn, did not look at the gathered crowd of nobles staring down from the balcony. He strode directly to Elara, knelt beside her unconscious body. His typically stoic face tightened. The harsh angles of his scarred features sharpened with something that might have been concern, might have been possessiveness. It was impossible to tell. The deep, jagged claw marks on her shoulder were still bleeding sluggishly. 4 parallel furrows carved through flesh, exposing muscle beneath. Her skin was pale as marble, bluish at the lips. Her breathing was shallow and ragged. Without a word, Theron unclasped his heavy royal cloak, the symbol of his absolute authority over the realm, the mantle that marked him as the Alpha King, ruler of all wolves, commander of armies, lord of territories that stretched from the northern ice fields to the southern coasts. He wrapped it gently around her shivering, broken form, gathered her into his arms, lifted her against his chest as if she weighed nothing at all. Her head lolled against his shoulder. Blood from her wounds soaked into his tunic, staining the dark fabric, or darker still. "Put her down, Theron." The voice cut through the courtyard like a whip crack. Lord Halvard Ashford marched through the gates, flanked by his enforcers. Seraphina Vale and Cale Thornridge fell into step behind him, their expressions carefully neutral, but their eyes gleaming with calculation. Halvard's face was flushed, not from the cold, from barely suppressed panic masquerading as authority. He puffed out his chest, projected a dominance he did not truly feel. Not here, not standing before the Alpha King with the evidence of his failures bleeding out in Theron's arms. "She is of the Ashford pack," Halvard demanded, his voice booming across the snow-covered marshland. "She is my subject. You will hand her over to my healers immediately." He took a step forward, then another, building momentum, building the performance. If she is truly a sterling Lycan, her place is with her pack, with those who raised her. We will see to her care. We will. Theron stopped walking. He did not turn around right away. The temperature in the courtyard seemed to plummet another 10 degrees. When the king finally turned to face Halvard, his cold sapphire stare promised absolute violence, the kind of violence that ended bloodlines. "Your subject," Theron's voice was dangerously quiet, a lethal purr that echoed off the castle walls despite its softness. "For 22 years you allowed the heir of the Sterling lineage to scrub your floors." Each word was deliberate, measured, a blade sliding between ribs. "You allowed your pack to beat her, starve her, mock her as a runt." His gaze swept over Seraphina and Kael. Both of them took an involuntary step backward. "You treated a queen like a feral dog." Halvard's mouth opened, closed. His throat worked, but no sound came out. Behind him, Seraphina shrank back, hiding partially behind Kael's broader frame. The arrogant smirk that had been her constant companion for years was entirely erased. "We did not know," Halvard finally stammered, his bravado crumbling under the crushing weight of Theron's aura. "Her wolf was sealed. There was no scent, no sign. How could we have—" "Because her mother, Lady Genevieve of the House of Lancaster, placed a blood seal on her the night the Sterling pack was massacred." Theron's words rang through the courtyard with absolute certainty. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered crowd of nobles and guards. Heads turned, whispers erupted. The Sterling Pack. Everyone knew the story. It was legend, tragedy, cautionary tale. 22 years ago, the Sterling Pack had been the most powerful bloodline in the realm. Royal wolves with silver fur and amethyst eyes. They had ruled for 3 centuries before the Blackstones rose to power. Then in a single night they were gone, slaughtered to the last. Men, women, children. The entire bloodline erased in a coordinated attack by a coalition of rival packs who feared their growing influence. Or so the official story went. The seal was ancient magic. Theron continued, his voice cutting through the whispers like a knife through silk. So deep it would only break under the most extreme desperate circumstance. He looked down at Elara's unconscious face, brushed a stray blood-matted lock of hair from her pale cheek with surprising gentleness. A seal that required her to face certain death, not for herself but to protect the innocent. The pieces clicked into place. Understanding dawned on faces throughout the crowd. The child. Corbin. She had not fought for her own life. She had fought for his. You knew. The whisper came from Cale Thornridge. He stared at the king in horror, his face draining of color. You knew what she was, Cale repeated louder this time, accusation and disbelief warring in his voice. That is why you did not let the archers fire. You used the boy. You used the rogue as bait. Every eye turned to Theron. The Alpha King met their stares without flinching. I did what was necessary. His voice was iron, unapologetic. I spent 5 years searching for the lost Sterling heir. His gaze swept over the crowd, daring any of them to challenge his morality. When my spies found her in your miserable pack, Halvard, I knew simply claiming her would not work. Her wolf was locked away in a trauma-induced coma, buried so deep that even she did not know it existed. He shifted Elara's weight slightly in his arms. Her head settled more securely against his shoulder. She needed a catalyst. She needed to choose to fight. Not for herself, she had given up on herself years ago, but for someone else, someone innocent, someone worth saving. Lord Alaric Grayson appeared at the edge of the crowd, Corbin clutched in his arms. The boy's face was pressed against his father's shoulder, but his wide eyes peeked out, staring at the silver-haired woman in the king's arms. Theron nodded toward them. The rogue was real, the danger was real, but the opportunity was engineered. His jaw tightened. I will not apologize for it. He looked down at Elara again. For the first time, the harsh angles of his scarred face softened. She possessed more courage as a powerless human than any of you possess with all your fangs and claws. His voice boomed across the courtyard, carrying to every corner, every balcony, every shadowed doorway where servants and guards watched. She stood alone against a nightmare to save a child that was not hers, a child from a pack she did not know, while you all watched from the safety of my walls. He locked eyes with Halvard. The older man actually flinched. Elara is no longer of Ashford, Theron declared. Each word rang with the weight of royal decree. You have forfeited any right to her. If you or any of your pack so much as speak her name without permission, I will personally mount your heads on the gates of Winterguard. He let the threat hang in the air for 3 long heartbeats. Do we understand each other, Halvard? Lord Halvard Ashford, Alpha of one of the oldest packs in the realm, dropped to his knees in the snow, bowed his head, bared his neck in absolute submission. Yes, my king. His voice was hollow, defeated. Theron turned his back on the cowering Alpha, carried Elara through the parting sea of royal guards. Nobles scrambled out of his path. Some bowed, others simply stared, unable to process what they had just witnessed. He carried her past the whispering crowds, past the bloodstains in the snow, past the corpse of the rogue already stiffening in the cold, through the massive iron doors of the inner keep, into the warmth of the castle, up 3 flights of stairs without pause despite her weight in his heavy armor, to his private chambers. The king's rooms, no one dared follow. The fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across walls hung with ancient weapons and battle standards. The chamber was larger than the entire servants' quarters Elara had shared with 6 other people back at the Ashford estate. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in heavy velvet curtains the color of deep wine. Furs were piled on top of thick blankets. A writing desk sat near the window, covered in maps and sealed letters. Armor stood on a rack in the corner, polished to a mirror shine. This was the heart of power in the realm, and Elara lay unconscious in the center of it. Theron had summoned the healers immediately. 3 women, each older than the castle itself, with hands that knew how to coax flesh back together and draw poison from wounds. They worked in efficient silence, cleaned the claw marks on her shoulder with water that smelled of herbs and something sharper, stitched the deepest of the 4 furrows with thread made from something Theron did not ask about, wrapped her ribs where the rogue's final strike had cracked at least 2 of them, dressed her in a simple linen shift that fell to her knees, covered her with furs and blankets until only her face showed. "She will live," the eldest healer said, wiping her hands on a cloth. "The wounds are clean, no infection. The ribs will heal in a week, maybe less if her wolf is as strong as it appeared." She glanced at Theron, her ancient eyes sharp. "She will need rest. And food. I suspect she has not eaten properly in years." Theron nodded once. The healers gathered their supplies and left without another word. The door closed with a soft thud. Silence filled the chamber, broken only by the crackle of the fire and Elara's shallow breathing. Theron stood at the foot of the bed for a long moment. Then he moved to the high-backed leather chair positioned beside it, sat down, removed his armor piece by piece, bracers first, then the chest plate, the pauldrons, until he wore only a simple dark tunic and trousers. He leaned back in the chair and waited. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Theron added more logs without leaving the chair. Outside the window, the snow continued to fall. The blizzard the wind had promised earlier finally arrived, howling against the stone walls. Somewhere in the castle, the Blood Moon Summit continued. Nobles would be feasting, drinking, negotiating alliances, and plotting betrayals. Theron did not care. His world had narrowed to this room, this bed, this woman, his mate. He had known the moment she walked into the Great Hall 2 days ago, before the humiliation, before the trial. His wolf had recognized hers even through the blood seal, even buried beneath 22 years of trauma and forced silence. The pull had been immediate, undeniable, a rightness that settled into his bones like he had been waiting his entire life without knowing what he was waiting for. But knowledge and claiming were 2 different things. He could not simply take her, could not announce the bond and expect her to accept it. Not when she had spent her entire life being powerless, being claimed by people who hurt her. She needed to claim herself first, claim her power, her identity, her right to exist as more than what others had made her. So he had waited, watched, planned, found the rogue in the deep woods where such creatures always lurked, captured it, starved it until its madness burned hotter than its instinct for self-preservation. Ensured the perimeter guards were elsewhere that night, left a child unattended near the forest edge. It was ruthless, cruel even, but it had worked. The seal had broken. The sterling wolf had emerged, and Elara had proven herself in a way no coronation or decree ever could. She had chosen to fight, not for herself, for someone else. That was the difference between a victim and a queen. Theron's gaze drifted to her face, peaceful in sleep, younger looking without the constant tension he had seen in the Great Hall. Shadows danced across the walls. The fire popped. And finally, after hours of stillness, Elara's eyes opened. She woke slowly. First awareness of warmth. Real warmth, not the thin, inadequate heat of a banked coal brazier in a drafty servant's quarters. Then scent, pine, winter, and something else. Something powerful and protective and utterly overwhelming. Her eyes fluttered open. Stone ceiling. Rough-hewn beams. Firelight. This was not the servants' quarters. Memory crashed back in a flood. The rogue. The fight. The pain. The awakening. She sat up too quickly. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as her ribs protested. Her hand flew to her side, found thick bandages wrapped around her torso beneath the linen shift. "You are awake," the voice came from her right. Elara's head snapped toward the sound. The king who had left her to die sat in a leather chair beside the bed. He had removed his armor, looked almost human in the simple tunic, though the muscle beneath the fabric and the scar across his face reminded her exactly what he was. A predator, an alpha, a king who had slaughtered his way to power. The memory of standing in the snow, watching him order his guards to hold their fire, hit her like a physical blow. Rage ignited in her chest, hot and vicious and completely unexpected. "You left me to die," she whispered. Her voice was raw, damaged from screaming. Theron leaned forward, rested his elbows on his knees, met her gaze without flinching. I left you to live. The quiet certainty in his voice only stoked her anger higher. You used a child as bait. Elara said, her hands fisting in the furs. You stood on that balcony and watched a monster try to tear me apart. I gave you the only chance you would ever have to be free. His voice cut through her rising fury like a blade. He stood, moved closer to the bed, sat on the edge of it, careful not to jostle her injuries. If I had saved you, Elara, you would have remained a prisoner in your own body, subjugated by Ashford for the rest of your life, beaten, starved, used. His frost blue gaze searched hers. The blood seal your mother placed on you could only be broken one way: extreme circumstances, desperate need, and a choice to protect someone innocent at the cost of your own life. Alara's breath caught. My mother, Lady Genevieve Lancaster, Theron said gently, last surviving female of the Sterling bloodline. She died the night the pack was massacred. But before she did, she sealed your wolf away so deep that no one could sense what you were. She hid you with the Ashfords because they were complicit in the massacre. She gambled that guilt would keep you alive, even if it did not keep you safe. Tears pricked at Alara's eyes. She had no memory of her mother. Had been told she was the bastard daughter of a servant who died in childbirth. A charity case that Halvard had grudgingly accepted out of honor. All lies. I could not tell you, Theron continued. If you tried to force the awakening, it would not have worked. The seal required genuine sacrifice, a choice made in the moment without calculation. He reached out slowly, gave her time to pull away. When she did not, his large, calloused hand gently covered hers. I am sorry for the terror I put you through. I will carry that for the rest of my life, but I am not sorry for the result. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You are a queen by blood, Elara, and now you are a queen in truth. She looked into his eyes, saw the ruthless king who had gambled with her life, but also something else, something that made her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with broken ribs. Mate, the word slipped out before she could stop it. Theron's expression shifted, softened. Yes. I do not understand, Elara said. I felt nothing in the Great Hall. My wolf was silent. How could you have known? My wolf knew, Theron said simply. The bond does not require both wolves to be awake to exist. It simply is. From the moment you walked through those doors, every instinct I had screamed to protect you, to claim you, to slaughter anyone who caused you pain. His jaw tightened. Watching Serafina humiliate you took every shred of control I possessed. I wanted to tear her apart with my bare hands. Elara remembered the way his eyes had locked on her in the Great Hall, the jolt she had felt, the confusion when he walked away. Her wolf had been trying to respond, even sealed some part of her had recognized him. You could have told me, she whispered. After. You could have explained before I forced you into a trial by fire. Theron's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. Would you have trusted me? Would you have believed anything I said? Elara opened her mouth to argue, closed it. He was right. If he had told her she was sterling royalty, that her wolf was sealed, that he was her mate, she would have thought him mad. Or worse, thought it was another form of cruelty, another game. I needed you to see it yourself, Theron said, to feel your own power, to know beyond any doubt that you are not what they told you you were. His hand tightened slightly on hers. You are not a runt. You are not weak. You are not worthless. Tears spilled over. Elara could not stop them. 22 years of being told she was nothing, being treated like nothing, believing she was nothing. And in one night, everything had changed. She looked at him, really looked at him. The scarred face, the piercing eyes, the brutal strength barely contained beneath skin. A king who had orchestrated her suffering to set her free. A mate who had watched her nearly desire rather than rob her of the choice. It was twisted, ruthless, morally gray in a way that should have terrified her, but she understood it. In a world built on power, he had given her the only gift that mattered, her own. I am not ready to forgive you, she said quietly. Theron nodded. I know, but I understand why you did it. That is enough. She squeezed his hand back, a small gesture, but deliberate. His eyes flared with something that looked like relief. They sat in silence for a long moment. The fire crackled. Snow pelted the window. Finally, Elara spoke. What happens now? Theron's expression shifted. hardened into something that looked like anticipation. Now, he said, Halvard and his pack answer for what they did to you. The next morning, Elara woke to find clothing laid out at the foot of the bed. Not the rough wool dress she had worn for years. Not a servant's garb. A gown, silver silk that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Fitted bodice with intricate embroidery. Long sleeves. A neckline that was modest but elegant. Beside it, a cloak of soft white fur. And a circlet, simple, silver, set with a single amethyst stone. Elara stared at it for a long time. Then she rose, washed with the water left in a basin, dressed herself slowly, careful of her bandaged ribs and healing shoulder. The gown fit perfectly, as if made for her. It probably had been. She fastened the cloak, settled the circlet on her head, looked at herself in the polished metal mirror mounted on the wall. A stranger stared back. Silver gown, white fur, amethyst crown, a queen. The door opened. Theron entered without knocking, stopped when he saw her. His eyes swept over her from head to toe. Something that looked like pride flickered across his face. They are waiting, he said. Who? Everyone. He offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, Elara took it. They walked through the castle together. Down corridors lined with guards who bowed as they passed. Through halls where servants stopped their work to stare. Word had spread. Of course it had. The sterling heir had returned. They reached the great hall, the same space where just 1 day ago, Elara had knelt and spilled ale while nobles laughed. Now she walked through the massive doors on the arm of the Alpha King. The hall fell silent. Every head turned. 100 wolves from a dozen different packs stared at the silver-gowned woman who had been invisible 24 hours ago. Halvard stood near the front, flanked by Seraphina and Kael. His face was ashen. The arrogance that had always defined him was gone, replaced by barely concealed terror. Theron led Elara to the raised dais at the head of the hall. 2 thrones sat there, one larger draped in black fur, one smaller empty. He guided her to the smaller throne. She sat. The symbolism was not lost on anyone in the room. Theron remained standing beside her, one hand resting on the back of her throne. Lord Halvard Ashford, Theron's voice rang through the hall. Step forward. Halvard moved on shaking legs, stopped 10 feet from the dais. You stand accused, Theron continued, of crimes against the Sterling bloodline. For 22 years you harbored the rightful heir, and for 22 years you subjected her to abuse, starvation, and degradation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. How do you answer? Halvard's mouth worked. No sound came out. Elara leaned forward slightly. Her voice when she spoke was quiet, but it carried. You knew what my mother was. Halvard flinched. You knew, Elara repeated louder now. The king's spies confirmed it. You were paid to keep silent, paid in lands and titles after the massacre. Gasps erupted throughout the hall. Halvard's face crumpled. I did not know you were hers, not at first, not until I was 12, Elara finished. Your beta told you. The scent markers finally showed, and you chose silence. She stood, slowly. Her ribs protested, but she ignored them. Walked down the steps of the dais, stopped directly in front of Halvard. You stole 22 years of my life. Her voice was steel. But you also gave me something. You taught me how to serve it, how to endure, how to protect what matters even when I have nothing. She held his gaze. I could execute you. It would be just, legal, satisfying. Halvard's knees buckled. He started to drop. But I will not. He froze halfway to the ground. You will be stripped of your title. Your lands will be seized and redistributed to the servants you abused. You will be exiled to the frozen north, where you will spend the rest of your days as powerless as you made me. She leaned closer. You will live, Halvard, but you will live knowing that the runt showed you mercy you never showed her. She turned her back on him, walked back to the throne, sat. Take him away. Guards moved forward, hauled Halvard to his feet, dragged him toward the doors. His broken sob echoed through the hall. Elara felt nothing. Seraphina Vale, Theron called. Kael Thornridge, step forward. The 2 enforcers approached slowly. Seraphina's golden beauty looked washed out in the harsh morning light. Kael's arrogance had been replaced by something that looked like fear. You stand accused of assault, psychological torture, attempted murder during training exercises. Elara looked at them, remembered every beating, every cruel word, every humiliation. Exile, she said simply, to the same territory as Halvard. You will serve him there, a fitting punishment watching your fallen alpha reduced to nothing while you are reduced alongside him. Seraphina's face twisted. You were weak. You deserved. Silence. Theron's voice cracked like thunder. Seraphina's mouth snapped shut. Guards dragged them away. The hall remained silent. Elara stood again, faced the assembled bulls. I am Elara of House Sterling, daughter of Genevieve Lancaster, heir to the bloodline that ruled these lands for 3 centuries. Her voice rang clear and strong. I claim my birthright. I claim my throne, and I claim my place as queen of this realm. She glanced at Theron. He stepped forward, removed something from his belt, a circlet larger than the one she wore, silver and black set with sapphires and amethysts intertwined. The Sterling Blackstone alliance, made real. He placed it on her head, replacing the simple circlet. Then he knelt. The Alpha King knelt before her. Every wolf in the hall immediately followed. 100 predators bent knee in submission to the Silver Queen. Elara looked out over them. These wolves who had ignored her, mocked her, dismissed her. Now they knelt. Not because Theron ordered it, because she had earned it. In blood, in courage, in the choice to protect an innocent life at the cost of her own. Rise, she said quietly. They rose as one. Theron stood, moved to his throne, sat beside her. Equal partners. The Blood Moon Summit continued. But everything had changed. The runt of Ashford was dead. The Silver Queen of Winterguard had arrived, and the realm would never be the same. The coronation took place 3 days later. 3 days for the realm to absorb the impossible. 3 days for ravens to fly to every corner of the territories carrying news that would be told and retold for generations. 3 days for Elara to learn what it meant to be something other than invisible. She spent those days in a strange dreamlike state. Healers visited twice daily, changing her bandages and applying salves that smelled of pine and something medicinal. Her shoulder was healing faster than any human wound should. The 4 parallel furrows left by the rogue's claws were already scabbing over the flesh, knitting itself back together with supernatural speed. Her ribs no longer screamed with every breath. The bone was mending. By the 2nd day, she could move without wincing. Her wolf was awake now, fully, completely awake. She could feel it beneath her skin, a presence that was both foreign and intimately familiar. Like finding a room in your house you had forgotten existed only to discover it had been there all along. The enhanced senses came first. Sounds that had been muffled before now had texture and depth. She could hear conversations 3 rooms away, could distinguish individual heartbeats in a crowded hall. The castle was never truly quiet. It hummed with life, and now she could hear every note. Scents layered themselves in complex patterns. She could smell the kitchen from her chambers, could identify what was cooking by scent alone, could track the passage of specific people through corridors by the unique signature each one left behind. Theron's scent was everywhere in his chambers, pine and winter and something that made her wolf purr with contentment deep in her chest. The mate bond, she felt it constantly now, a golden thread connecting her to him, thrumming with awareness whenever he was near. It did not control her, did not override her thoughts or desires, but it was there, steady, grounding. He gave her space, did not push, did not demand, but he was always nearby, working at his desk while she rested, bringing her meals personally rather than sending servants, answering her questions about Sterling history, about the massacre, about the political landscape she now had to navigate, teaching her in his quiet way how to be a queen. On the morning of the 3rd day, a knock came at the chamber door. Elara was standing by the window watching snow fall over the mountains. She had discovered she could partially shift now, just her eyes turning them amethyst without fully transforming. It sharpened her vision even further. She could see individual snowflakes, could track a hawk circling half a mile away. "Come in," she called. The door opened. A woman entered, older, perhaps 70, with silver hair braided in an intricate crown around her head. She wore robes of deep purple embroidered with symbols Elara did not recognize. Her eyes were sharp, knowing. "Lady Elara," the woman said, bowing slightly, "my name is Mira Silverthorn. I was elder historian to the Sterling Pack before the massacre. I have traveled a great distance to see you." Elara turned from the window. You knew my mother. I delivered you, Mira said simply. I was there the night Genevieve placed the blood seal. I am the one who suggested hiding you with the Ashfords. They owed your mother a blood debt from a border dispute years prior. I gambled that debt would keep you alive. She moved further into the room, her gaze sweeping over Elara with something that looked like relief. I have spent 22 years wondering if I made the right choice, wondering if you survived, if the seal would ever break. Her voice cracked slightly. And then 3 nights ago I felt it. From 500 miles away I felt the sterling wolf awaken. Alara's throat tightened. You came all this way. You are the last of your line, Mira said. The very last of Sterling. I would have crossed the realm on foot if necessary. She reached into her robes and withdrew something wrapped in cloth, unfolded it carefully. A pendant lay in her palm, silver shaped like a crescent moon cradling a star. An amethyst stone was set at the center, glowing faintly with inner light. This belonged to your mother, Mira said, and her mother before her. It has been passed down through the Sterling bloodline for 10 generations. It is yours now. Elara took it with trembling hands. The metal was warm. The amethyst pulsed gently against her palm, resonating with something deep inside her chest. Her wolf recognized it. It will amplify your abilities, Mira explained. Sharpen your senses. Strengthen your connection to your wolf. And it will warn you when danger is near. The stone glows brighter the closer the threat. Elara fastened it around her neck. The pendant settled against her breastbone, the weight of it both physical and symbolic. 10 generations. She was not alone. Not really. She carried them all with her. Thank you, she whispered. Mira smiled. There is one more thing you should know. Your coronation today is not merely ceremony. It is law. Once you are crowned, you will have full authority to make decrees, to change laws, to reshape the realm as you see fit. Her sharp eyes glinted. Use that power wisely, child. The realm is watching. The great hall had been transformed. Gone were the feasting tables. In their place, rows of benches filled with nobles from every pack in the realm. They wore their finest silks and velvets and furs, jewelry glinting in the firelight. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. At the far end of the hall, the dais had been expanded. 2 thrones now sat there, raised on a platform of polished stone. Behind them, banners hung, the black wolf of House Blackstone and the silver wolf of House Sterling, side by side. Equal. Elara stood in a small antechamber off the main hall, staring at her reflection in a full-length mirror. The gown she wore was a masterpiece. Silver silk that seemed to capture and hold light, embroidered with threads of white gold in patterns that resembled wolf fur. The bodice was fitted, the neckline modest but elegant. Long sleeves covered the healing scars on her shoulder. The skirt fell in soft folds to the floor, trailing slightly behind her. Her hair had been washed and brushed until it shone, then arranged in an intricate style that left it mostly loose but pulled back from her face with silver pins. The sterling pendant hung at her throat, the amethyst glowing softly. She looked like a queen. She still felt like a girl who had scrubbed floors 3 days ago. The door opened. Theron entered and the breath left her lungs. He wore a formal black tunic embroidered with silver wolf fur cloak fastened with chains. His hair was neatly trimmed for the ceremony, the scars somehow making him look more regal. And his eyes, those eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her wolf stir. You look like you were born to this, he said quietly. Elara shook her head. I feel like an imposter. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. You are the daughter of Genevieve Lancaster, the granddaughter of Aldrich Sterling, who ruled this realm for 40 years. You carry the bloodline of queens and conquerors. His hand came up gently, tilting her chin so she met his gaze. You are no imposter, Elara. You are exactly where you belong. She searched his face, found only certainty. Are you ready? He asked. No, she thought. But she nodded anyway. He offered his arm. She took it. Together they walked into the great hall. The noise of conversation died the moment they appeared. Every head turned, every eye locked on the woman in the silver walking beside the Alpha King. Elara kept her spine straight, her chin lifted, her hand steady on Theron's arm. They walked down the center aisle between the rows of benches. Wolves rose as they passed, bowing slightly. Some faces showed genuine respect. Others showed fear. A few showed resentment, barely concealed. She ignored them all. At the front of the hall, Lord Alaric Grayson stood with young Corbin. The boy's face lit up when he saw her. He clutched a small bundle of winter roses, white and pale pink, somehow still fresh despite the season. As Elara and Theron reached the dais, Corbin broke away from his father, ran forward on small legs, stopped in front of Elara, and carefully, solemnly placed the flowers at her feet. "Thank you for saving me, Silver Lady," he said, his voice high and clear. Elara's heart clenched. She knelt, ignoring the slight protest from her ribs, so she was at eye level with the boy. "Thank you for being brave," she said softly. "You did not cry. You listened when I told you to stay hidden. You were very, very brave." Corbin beamed. Then on impulse, he threw his small arms around her neck in a quick hug before running back to his father. The hall erupted in applause, not polite, restrained clapping, real applause. Genuine. The child she had saved honoring her publicly. The symbolism was perfect. Theron helped her rise. They ascended the steps of the dais together. Elder Mira stood at the center holding a cushion. On it rested a crown. Not the simple circlet Elara had worn before. This was a true crown. Silver wrought to resemble leaves and branches intertwining. Amethysts were set throughout, catching the light. At the front, a larger stone the size of a robin's egg glowed with the same inner light as her pendant. The sterling crown, lost in the massacre. Recovered by Theron's spies years ago and kept hidden, waiting for the rightful heir. The hall fell silent. Mira's voice rang out clear despite her age. "We gathered today to witness the restoration of an ancient bloodline, to crown the last daughter of Sterling, to bind together two houses in alliance and partnership." She looked at Elara. "Elara of House Sterling, do you swear to protect the realm, to defend those who cannot defend themselves, to rule with wisdom and mercy, but also with strength when strength is required?" Elara's voice was steady. "I swear it." "Do you swear to honor the bond between Sterling and Blackstone? To stand as equal partner to the Alpha King? To build a realm where power is shared, not hoarded?" "I swear it." Mira lifted the crown from the cushion, placed it gently on Elara's head. The weight of it settled like destiny. "Then by the ancient laws of our people, by blood and bond and battle won, right, I name you Elara Sterling, Queen of the Northern Territories, protector of the realm, the Silver Wolf reborn." Theron stepped forward. He wore his own crown, black iron set with sapphires, the Blackstone crown that marked him as Alpha King. He took Elara's hand, raised it high. "The queen is crowned," he shouted. The hall erupted. Every wolf rose to their feet, voices lifted in a howl that shook the rafters. Not words, not language. The ancient call of the pack acknowledging their leader. Elara felt her wolf rise in response. Her eyes shifted without her conscious thought, glowing amethyst bright, and she howled back. The sound that came from her throat was pure power. It resonated through the hall, through the castle, through the mountains themselves. A queen's howl. When silence finally fell, Theron guided her to her throne. She sat. He sat beside her. Equal. "Now," Theron said quietly only to her, "comes the part they will remember." He raised his voice, addressing the hall. "Queen Elara has earned her crown through courage and sacrifice. She has proven herself worthy in blood and fire. And now she will speak her first decree as rightful ruler of this realm." All eyes turned to Elara. She stood slowly. Let the weight of the crown settle. Let the power of the moment build. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the hall. "For 22 years I lived as the lowest among you. I was beaten, starved, mocked, treated as less than nothing." She paused. "I was not unique. Throughout this realm there are others like me. Wolves whose animals sleep late or not at all. Those born without the strength or speed or size that our society values." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "They are called runts, defects, burdens." Her voice hardened. "That ends today." She descended the steps of the dais, walked to the center of the hall so everyone could see her clearly. "My first decree as Queen, the Runt Protection Act. Any wolf found abusing, starving, or otherwise tormenting a member of their pack who has not shifted will face exile. Minimum sentence, 10 years in the frozen north." Gasps erupted. "Second decree, mandatory rotation of servants. No wolf may be bound to servitude for more than 2 years. After that time, they must be offered training in a trade or released to seek their fortune elsewhere." More gasps. Some nobles looked outraged. "Third decree, trial by witness. Any wolf accused of a crime has the right to call witnesses in their defense. The word of an alpha is no longer absolute law. Justice requires evidence, not just authority. The hall exploded into noise, shouting, arguments erupting. Theron stood, did not raise his voice, did not need to. The weight of his presence crushed the noise into submission. "The Queen has spoken," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "These decrees are law. Any pact that refuses to comply will answer to me personally." Silence fell like a guillotine. Elara returned to the dais, to her throne, looked out over the assembled nobles. Some looked angry, some looked thoughtful. A few looked almost relieved, and in the back half hidden in shadow, a handful of servants watched with something that looked like hope. This realm was built on strength. Elara said, her voice quieter now, but no less powerful. But strength without mercy is tyranny. And tyranny is what destroyed my bloodline. She met the gaze of every alpha she could see. "We will be better, or we will fall." She sat. The coronation feast began. Hours later, when the nobles had drunk their fill and the musicians had played their last song, Elara and Theron retreated to their chambers. The private rooms that were now theirs, shared space, a symbol of the alliance made real. Elara removed the crown, carefully setting it on a stand beside the bed. Her fingers trembled slightly. Adrenaline was finally fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "You did well," Theron said. He was removing his own crown, his formal cloak, shedding the weight of ceremony. "I made enemies," Elara said. "Half those alphas wanted to challenge me on the spot. They will learn." He moved closer. "You offered them a choice, adapt or be removed. The smart ones will adapt. And the others," his smile was cold, "the others will provide examples for the rest." Elara should have been disturbed by the casual way he spoke of violence, should have recoiled from the brutality. But she had lived in a brutal world her entire life. The difference now was that she had the power to shape that brutality towards something better. "Do you regret it?" Theron asked quietly. "The decrees, they will make your rule harder, make enemies where you could have had allies." Elara thought of the servants watching from the shadows, the hope in their eyes. "No," she said, "I regret nothing." He reached out, cupped her face gently in his hands. The gesture was tender in a way that still surprised her, coming from a man as ruthless as him. "You are everything I knew you would be," he said. Then he kissed her. It was not their first kiss. That had come 2 nights ago in a quiet moment when words had failed and instinct had taken over. But this was different. This was not desperation or relief or the mate bond burning too hot to ignore. This was a promise. A partnership forged in blood and fire, in impossible choices. A queen and a king bound together by something deeper than politics or strategy. When they finally pulled apart, Elara rested her forehead against his. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Theron said, a hint of humor warming his voice. "We rebuild a realm together." Just that, just that." She laughed. It felt strange. Good. Laughter had been rare in her life before. They moved to the bed. Not for ceremony or duty, but simply for rest. The day had been long. Tomorrow would be longer. Outside, snow continued to fall over the mountains. Inside, the Silver Queen and the Alpha King slept their wolves content and their bond unbreakable. 6 months later, the training yard at Winterguard had been expanded. What was once a simple space for sparring had been transformed into a full combat academy. Targets lined one wall, weapons racks filled another. A section had been cleared for hand-to-hand training, and in the center, Elara stood facing 12 students. They ranged in age from 16 to 30, male and female both. Some had shifted late, their wolves only emerging in their 20s. Others had never shifted at all, their animals remaining stubbornly silent despite every ritual and ceremony. Runts, outcasts, the forgotten, until now. "Again," Elara called. She stood in the center of the circle unarmed, watching as they tried to land a hit. A young woman lunged from the left. Elara sidestepped, using the attacker's momentum to send her tumbling past. A man tried from the right. She caught his arm twisted, put him on his back in the snow. They were learning, slowly, but learning. She had discovered something in the past 6 months. Her wolf was powerful, yes. But her years as a human, years of being hunted, of surviving without claws or fangs, had taught her how to fight smart rather than strong. And she could teach that. "Good," she said, helping the man to his feet. "You are learning to read movement. but you are still telegraphing your intent. Your shoulders shift before you commit to the strike. Hide that, and you will land the hit. He nodded, breathing hard. A small voice called from the edge of the yard. Lady Elara. Can I train too? Corbin Grayson stood near the gate, clutching a wooden practice sword nearly as tall as he was. He was 6 now, growing fast. His father stood behind him, smiling. You are a bit young yet, Elara called back, grinning. But you said anyone can learn. I did say that. She glanced at her students. Take a break. Practice your footwork. She crossed the yard to where Corbin waited, knelt so she was at his level. You want to be a warrior? She asked. He nodded enthusiastically. I want to be strong, like you, so I can protect people too. Her heart clenched. Then you will be. When you are 8, you may join the beginner's class. Until then, practice with your father. Learn discipline. Learn patience. Corbin's face fell slightly, but he nodded. I will practice. Every day. Good boy, she ruffled his hair. Alaric stepped forward. The queen is kind to indulge him. He is brave, Elara said simply. Bravery should be encouraged. She returned to her students. They trained for another hour before she dismissed them. As they filed out, chattering excitedly despite their exhaustion, Theron appeared at the gate. He watched her with that quiet intensity he often wore, assessing, appreciating. Your academy grows, he said as she approached. Word is spreading. She fell into step beside him. They walked together through the castle grounds, guards trailing at a respectful distance. 3 more packs have sent runts to train. Another might have sent requests. You are building something that will outlast us both, Theron observed. Good. They walked in comfortable silence for a time. The castle had become truly home over the past months. Not the cold, unwelcoming fortress it had seemed during the Blood Moon Summit, but a place of warmth and purpose. The reforms were working. Slowly, not without resistance. 2 alphas had openly defied the new laws and found themselves stripped of titles and exiled. Their packs had been absorbed into neighboring territories, their lands redistributed. The message was clear. Adapt or fall. Most chose to adapt. I have news, Theron said as they entered the inner keep. Good or bad, both. He guided her to their chambers. Once inside, he poured 2 glasses of wine, handed her one. A coalition of Southern packs has requested an audience. They want to discuss expanding the Runt Protection Act to include wolves who shift but are considered weak by their pack standards. Alara's eyebrows rose. They want to expand protections. Apparently, your policies have inspired some of the younger alphas. They see the value in protecting their people rather than culling them. And the bad news. Theron's expression darkened slightly. There are rumors, whispers of a faction forming in the Eastern Territories. Wolves who believe the old ways were better, who think your reforms make the realm weak. Elara sipped her wine. Rebellion? Oh, me. Not yet, but it could become one if left unchecked. She moved to the window, looked out over the mountains, her mountains now, her realm. Let them whisper, she said quietly. Let them plot. When they move against us, we will be ready. Theron came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, careful of the barely visible scars on her shoulder. You sound like a queen, he murmured against her hair. I am a queen. He chuckled. The sound was warm, genuine. And there is one more thing. Theron continued, his tone shifting to something warmer. Elder Mira has agreed to stay. She will serve as royal historian, teaching the next generation about Sterling history. Elara smiled. The old woman had become a quiet anchor over the past months, filling in the gaps of a heritage Elara had never known. She deserves a proper place here. Your academy also bears fruit, Theron said. 3 of your students passed their combat trials last week. One, a girl named Lyra, who never shifted, took down 2 fully transformed wolves using the techniques you taught her. Pride warmed Elara's chest. She was always the fastest learner. And the Southern Coalition, she asked? They arrive next month. If the treaty is signed, the Runt Protection Act will extend to 16 territories by year's end. His hand tightened on her waist. You are changing the realm, Elara. One law, one student, one ally at a time. She turned in his arms to face him. We are changing it. We, he agreed. They stood together watching the sun set over Winterguard, painting the snow gold and pink. Do you ever think about that night? Elara asked. The rogue, the trial. Every day. Do you regret it? Theron was quiet for a long moment. I regret the fear I caused you, he said finally. I regret that there was no gentler way. But I do not regret that it happened, because it gave you this. He gestured to the realm beyond the window. It gave you yourself. Elara leaned back against him. I used to dream of running away, living as a human in some small town where no one knew what I was supposed to be. And now I dream of building something better, a realm where no one has to run away to be safe. His arms tightened around her. We will build it, together. The sun sank below the mountains. Stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the castle, the evening meal was being prepared. Nobles would gather, politics would be played, alliances would shift and reform like snow in the wind. But here in this moment, there was only peace. The Silver Queen and the Alpha King, two broken souls who had found each other in the worst possible way and had forged something unbreakable from the shattered pieces. Far below in the training yard, Elara's students began their evening drills. In the great hall, servants worked without fear, knowing the law now protected them. In the frozen North Halvard, Ashford chopped wood with hands that had never known labor, learning what powerlessness truly meant. And throughout the realm, in 100 different pax runts who had lived in shadows began to hope, because a queen who had been one of them now sat on the throne. And she had not forgotten where she came from. The runt of Ashford was dead, but the Silver Queen of Winterguard lived, and the realm would never be the same.